having. But for the listeners, for everyone watching, why don't you give the brief intro into who you are and your background and your most recent work?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Jesse Berger, and I recently published Magic Internet Money, a book about Bitcoin. My background started in banking. Prior to that, I studied economics and philosophy in undergrad, but started in retail banking in 2006. And I did that for 4.5 years before jumping into wealth management and investment advisory. So I did that on Bay Street, which is Canada's Wall Street, for those that may not know. I did that for 3 years, ultimately decided that I did not want to continue managing other people's money for various reasons, which we can or we will or won't go into later. Decided to go get my MBA so that I could pivot and just find something new to do. I knew I didn't want to stay on that stream that I was on, so got my MBA. I think I was very fortunate in my MBA experience. I think I sort of had a very rare experience, again, for a number of reasons that worked out great for me. Wound up doing some management consulting in the financial sector before ultimately doing market research consulting, where I managed the market research campaign for one of Canada's large insurance companies that did sort of a global market outreach program. I managed that for 2 years. And then while I was at that company, had rediscovered Bitcoin because I had initially discovered it in 2011 while I was working in wealth management, but rediscovered Bitcoin and have subsequently been, diving further and further down the rabbit hole. And ultimately, the book is basically a culmination of all my experiences. I think is sort of a great way of thinking about the book for me personally, and what it is and how it came about. And yeah, I honestly, I could not be more proud of the book. It was very much a labor of love and something I cared deeply about for an entire year, which, I obsessed over it for a year while I worked on it. And so, yeah, so I'm here today, to chat about the book, chat about Bitcoin, chat about life. And
Yeah,
it's great to be here.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you. And the book is fantastic. I finished it up recently. It's a unique format, and I think there's so much content. So, actually, there's so many books even coming out in the space lately, which is awesome that so many people feel compelled to express their thoughts on this thing. But it's great to see like some variety in how it's approached, and I love how yours is like these mini chapters, where it's you tackle kind of each individual thing or aspect of Bitcoin and just give like a real consumable 2 or 3 paragraph explanation about it and then on to the next one. I got lots of questions about the book, but what was it that why did you decide to structure it that way?
The truth is, it was initially started as call it this PowerPoint. I didn't plan on writing a book. I don't, consider myself an author. I didn't know the first thing about writing a book, but I had started this PowerPoint of, I'm going to explain Bitcoin to investors because I had this background in wealth management, and maybe I could, somehow I'll make something of that. At the time I had left my job and I just knew I was going to do something Bitcoin related. I just didn't know what. And so, okay, started with this PowerPoint. And, if you've given a PowerPoint presentation, like each slide tends to be, you're trying to make a point with each slide. And basically I took that idea or that format and applied it to the book. And once I decided to make it a book, I mean, it just became this snowball where the ideas and the format, it just, piled on top of each other, and it grew and grew as it was rolling down the hill. And I felt that I could somehow line it up so that, like you said, you're getting these small little bites of arguments, but that they could be very on point and also in sequence in such a way that I'm building up people's knowledge so that I can help them really try to wrap their head around Bitcoin, because Bitcoin, for those that are less familiar with it, is complicated. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's hard to keep those ideas straight. And if you try to explain it sort of all at one shot, I think you're setting yourself up for a lot of difficulty. Whereas I thought, okay, if I can just, people have short attention spans today, I think as well. And I'm a victim of that too. Um, so if I could just shorten it so that, okay, you can just bite off whatever you think you can chew in one piece. And then when you're ready, you'll build on and do the next part. So yeah, that's sort of how, and
And
what the thinking was with the format.
I think anyone who's done any writing, they appreciate how tedious it can be. You know, you've got all these disordered thoughts in your mind, and you have this inescapable feeling that there's something of value in there.
Yeah.
And you might even be overly confident of the what that value is. But then when you try to put it from, torrent of thought to pen to paper, or, on the screen, it comes out way messier and way more disordered, and way less structured than it sounded when you were saying those words in your head, right? So
100%.
I'm always fascinated by, and I always ask the question to authors, like, what is your process for ordering those thoughts? How do you extract those insights that are crystal clear when you have them in your head and get them on the page in a manner that allows them to be crystal clear to the person reading them?
It was definitely a lot of trial and error and iteration in terms of so the book, just again for listeners, so there's 12 chapters, and then each chapter is, call it, 6 to 8 pages, give or take, of every page is that individual argument. And so I had, generally speaking, the broad strokes of the chapters mapped out pretty early on. And some chapters, call it the chapter on money or the narrative and the origins of Bitcoin. Those were, okay, I had a really good idea of what I was going to write for those. But then topics like governance and freedom and innovation, which are 3 other chapters, those formed as I would put pen to paper and get those ideas down and start tinkering with them and thinking about them. I had, again, the rough ideas, I think, fairly early on, but then actually formulating it, putting everything in its right place, in its right sequence. And when I say in its right place, in its right sequence, it's not just which page in what order, it's literally what sentence in what order. I was flipping paragraphs and flipping sentences within paragraphs all the time. And as I'm coming up with new ideas I would just come up with a smorgasbord of thoughts one day where I'm just, banging out, call it a dozen just ideas, one-liners even. And then the next day it's, okay, how do I stitch these together? How does the flow of the argument work? Does it make sense? Is this the right point to make? Is this point impactful enough? Because I wanted to be, as much as I had this personal restraint on, okay, every argument is a page, so I had this personal limitation, it still had to be pointed and impactful, but easy to read and have my personality or my sort of fingerprint on it, so that it would be friendly to readers. Because I realized very early in the process that if I didn't make it friendly and approachable, that I don't think it would be successful. It was something that was very important to me, and was sort of some early feedback that I got on the book, where someone told me, oh, okay, these chapters, you seem smart, but like, I don't understand them, and this is coming from someone who's not in the space. So it's like, okay, yeah, I really need to put myself in the reader's shoes. And once I did that, again, sort of we talked earlier about the book, for me is a bit of a culmination of sort of all my experiences, drawing from my old MBA program, where I learned that you can have really thorough analysis, but if you don't frame the argument, give context, even have a little bit of showmanship, that thought can fall flat on the readers or the listeners or the judge or whoever it's going to be. So putting myself in the reader's shoes was really important. And once I established that also just helped keep things moving along for me.
Right. Yeah, it's I used to write a lot when I was younger, and I've started to pick it back up now, because I think, like many Bitcoiners, the torrent of thoughts in your head just is amplified now more so than it may have ever been previously. And I'm glad to hear you say that, you do a dump and then, like, you reorder the sentences later, because when I do that, sometimes I feel like almost sheepish about it because I'm like, but that, I took a sentence from like this paragraph and 3 paragraphs down, I like inserted it in, and I feel like I'm engineering it too much. But then, I obviously it's all coming from my brain, so that gives me some solace. But it's it's really tedious, and you've got to be, I guess you've got to be determined and committed that you've got to have faith that you've got a unique way of ordering and articulating these thoughts. And that's what makes the time commitment worthwhile to actually do it. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, you're probably not going to make a great deal of money from this book, right?
Oh,
So,
no.
it's obviously a labor of love, but you've got to rationalize it some way. And I think for all of us who put stuff out in the space, it's like, well, one, it really helps us order our own thoughts, hearing our own voices, reading our own words. It allows us to have that mirror to help us explore our own understanding of things, and that's really helpful because we get that feedback, and then we refine it, and then we continue to do it. And hopefully, I guess the faith is that we come to a better ability to articulate what our understanding of that actually is, and maybe that has some benefit for us, and maybe that has some benefit for the people that are listening or consuming it. But man, it's when you're doing it, it seems, and I'm referring to writing here because it's one that's I find so much more challenging than speaking. And how do you deal with just like distraction? Like, because when it's that tedious, your mind wanders, because it's when something provides so much resistance, all your mind wants to do is be like, oh, like what's happening on Twitter, or what's the score in the game, or what's Bitcoin's price doing. So how did you tackle that issue?
Yeah. I mean, thinking about one thing only all the time is definitely not healthy, I don't think. So distraction is definitely key. Whether it was something as simple as going for a walk, stretching my legs, clearing my head, those things are helpful. Certain vices can be helpful sometimes to get the creative juices flowing. And they were.
Which vices are we talking about here?
Nothing crazy. Only stuff that's legal in Canada at the time that I was writing.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, it's hard. Being a writer, I have a new appreciation for sure for, if I can use an example here, a guy like Marty Bent, who puts out a daily newsletter.
Yeah.
Like as I'm writing this book, and I realize every morning I'm getting the Daily Bent in my inbox, I'm just in awe of the fact that he's stringing together a coherent and meaningful and just impactful thought every single day about this one topic, and it just keeps hitting the inbox every day. Because I would have, forget days on end, I would have a week or two where it's just complete writer's block, can't get an idea out, even if it's a topic I knew about. So again, I had that background in banking and wealth management. So the chapter on money, I felt like, okay, this should be a pretty easy one for me. I'm going to knock this one out and it'll be good and I'll be happy with it and I'll be able to do it in a relatively short time frame. And that was not the case at all. Even though I knew a lot of the ideas that I wanted to write, again, framing those ideas so that the reader could understand it, and not only that they could understand it, but that they could come back to it and take value from it again and again and again if they wanted to reference some of the arguments again. That was really hard. And then again, there's all the other chapters that I had to get into. So yeah, writing is challenging. You definitely need to be distracted. It comes in waves too. Like when you're in, for the flip side of your question, when you're in the zone and you just have this consciousness dump that's coming out of you, and it's beautiful and coherent, and it just feels like, okay, you're putting your heart and soul into it, and it's going to hit. Like, there was no better feeling than if I could get a couple paragraphs or a page done in a day and come back the next day and be like, wow, like that was great. I'm not going to have to do a lot to that. So yeah, it's a tough gig writing.
That flow state, or you engage the muse just right, and it just all comes out and you don't have to do much cleaning up afterwards.
Yeah, it was few and far between that would, it was seldom that would happen. But when it did, it is a fantastic feeling.
And when you finally, put the last period down, when you finally finished it up, what was the feeling?
almost like, well, what now? Like I dedicated a year of my life to just sort of crafting.
How long per day would you be working on it for a year?
Um, some days, call it 2 or 3 hours, but there were days where I'd be directly or indirectly working on it for 12, 14 hours. If the mood strikes in the middle of the night, you just go with it. Like when you feel it, you don't have a choice. You just have to go with it. Because it may be a while before that strikes again.
Man, it's insane how much Bitcoin compels voluntary contribution.
Absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
look, you just spent a year, several hours. I mean, that's a shitload of time, and the opportunity cost, was probably substantial. And it continues across, different, whether it's writing books or core devs or doing podcasts or all the different stuff people do. I mean, it's just like people are compelled to express their understanding of it and contribute in some way.
And yeah, and I think that's because we all, right, like we said, we sort of see that Bitcoin, it can be that light at the end of the tunnel that gives us, okay, there's hope for the world because we have this tool that has never in any way, shape, or form really been around before.
Right.
Nothing that even comes close to it. And so it's just, I want to help create this future. What does my skill set, my experience, how does it lend to pushing us forward, to getting us closer to that end goal? And somehow, some way, this became the way for me. And so, yeah, so it's just, okay, you're compelled and you have to do it.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, like once you reach a certain understanding or perception of this thing, it's like, how can you not? Like it's genuinely compelling you. But, the flip side of it, or not the flip side, but another, I'd be interested in knowing from an outside perspective, right? So, partner, friends, family who see you be compelled about this invisible thing on the internet and how much time you're devoting to it and how passionate you are about explaining it or committing to it and that kind of stuff. I mean, what was the response from the people closest to you?
Yeah. I mean, at first, it's a challenge because whether if they don't know about Bitcoin or fully understand it, and obviously I was already deep enough down the rabbit hole that I had this idea, and I'm trying to say, no, this is the thing. Like, roll with me on this. This is the thing. Explaining it to them in words like you and I talking right now. I don't. You said before that you feel you're a better speaker, a better orator. For me, it's the opposite. I'm a scatterbrain. I jump from topic to topic to topic, and I don't always connect the dots I need to, which is why writing was such a great exercise for me, because it allowed me to just blurt out a whole bunch of topics. And then as I would approach it again and again with a new set of eyes, I'm stitching it together until that complexity that I was holding in my head could now be more seamless and straightforward. But yeah, as I would say, as it evolved, they could get further and further on board with it because they are also my sounding board, right? My sort of closest family friends are some of the people that are reading it, giving me feedback, saying, oh, I like the way you explain this. Oh, I didn't understand. What does this part mean? What are you getting at? What's the point you're making? So as they would get more and more into it, they became more and more accepting of it, understanding that, okay, you're hitting some hard notes here, and they seem to be meaningful and profound. So yeah, like let's I'm getting more excited. They start to get more excited about, let's see what the end product looks like. When's it done? I can't tell you how many times I heard in the last 6 months of writing the book, because I thought I'd be done way sooner than I was. But in the last, call it 6 months, is it done yet? Is it done yet? Is it done yet? Like, I got that so often. It was getting under my skin. Yeah. So I'm like, you can't rush,
I'll tell you
greatness.
When it's
you can't
done.
rush. Yeah, you can't. Listen, if I finish it now, I won't be happy with it. And I can't have that. I need this thing to be great for my own personal satisfaction. I need to go to bed at night knowing that I gave absolutely everything I have to give to this, and that I think anybody could read it and take some serious value from it. And so please stop asking me when it's done, because you'll know when it's done.
And as far as those people reading the finished product, you know, from zero to orange pilled, where do you think they would fall on that spectrum after having read the book?
It's different for some of the
Sure.
different
Yeah.
people and their, previous understandings and leanings and backgrounds and whatnot. But you know, the results don't lie in terms of what Bitcoin's doing. The price is sort of one of the few indicators in the real world that we have hash power. Is not another, sure. But price is sort of an easy one for anyone to follow, and so you see that and what it's starting to do lately, and that becomes a little bit more vindication of everything that went into it.
Yeah. I find it so funny that I'll often, like, with someone who is genuinely listening, you know, because there's no point in having the Bitcoin chat with people that are kind of dismissive or are not interested. But I'll go through the steps, you know, each of the different aspects of this thing, and all along the way they'll be like, yeah, yeah, that makes sense, and that's interesting, and then like I'll finish it off, and they'll just be like, yeah, that's cool, and I'll be like, what do
Yeah,
you mean that's
yeah.
cool?
It,
Like, how is that your
it
response?
it it honestly bothers me when it doesn't click for people, right? So for again, going back to my background, right? Like I was red pilled on Austrian economics in 2007. Okay, so I was on the gold bandwagon in 2007 because that at the time was sound money. And
Right, me
so
too.
yeah, so when people, when I try to explain money to people, for me it's like, well, this is so obvious. Like, how do you not see this? How do you not get this? And it can definitely be frustrating when they don't wrap their head around it.
Yeah,
Um,
i think
and
I think a big part of that is there's a big cohort of people that they won't believe something until they see it, you know, and I guess this is like the kind of the literal definition of a visionary, right? You're able to see something before it happens.
yeah,
And I think that is just maybe you know, and that's why number go up is so effective, because it's literally the result that they can see
yes,
that, as you said, validates or vindicates the argument. But you know, a lot of people, the argument on its own may never be sufficient, because like I said, I mean, I can go through each hoop and get confirmation at every single step, and then get them to appreciate what the implications of said steps
yeah,
being would be, and then just be like, cool, I'll you know, it's time for dinner or whatever, or let's say
yeah,
whatever. And so I think that's just until reality shows you it's real, you're not going to be able to devote your attention to it, or you're not going to be pulled in by it.
Part of that maybe can be attributed to there's a little bit of a sort of a deep-seated complacency in our world today, right? Like
Oh
everyone
yeah.
to a degree, right, relies on, well, things will work themselves out because someone else is looking after it, right? That
Hmm.
the personal responsibility of, if you want to save the money that you earned, you know, no one's going to do that for you. And that applies to a lot of other elements of life too, right? Um, so yeah, to really, it's hammering Bitcoin through people's heads is more than the sound money argument. It's the cultural, philosophical, lifestyle, right? It's all that sort of bundled up.
Yeah,
And
it's a
that's
lot.
hard because you're changing deeply ingrained, you're trying to upset patterns of life that people have just sort of naturally assumed and grown up with, and it's been their standard for so long.
Yeah.
So to just derail that and say, no, get on this standard, get on this parallel standard, is can be upsetting. And also, well, just the effort involved in making the leap to get over there, the thought of that can be daunting. And so they say, okay, well, I'm comfortable enough here, so I'm just going to wait here.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's a very much, in many cases, a worldview shift. You know, it's not just like new money and that's cool and I'll save my time better. I mean, as you just said, I mean, it innervates so many other areas of your life and your perspective, and you know, you're the core of your being effectively. So it's difficult for it, uh, you know, if you have resistance to that level of change, you may be resistant to any sort of argument, no matter how well put or rational it may be, because it's asking for too much change, and that's why people hop into this at different stages and different times, and they go down the rabbit hole with a different speed, and that's the adoption cycle, right?
Yeah,
Everyone's
it's
coming
it's
in
a
at different
lot.
points.
It's a lot of dots to have to connect, right? You have
Yeah,
to be, like you said, you were sort of saying how you tick the different boxes of the arguments as you're going. It's not only ticking those boxes, it's then drawing the line through all of them so that this all now becomes one sort of unified vision.
exactly.
And that is even more difficult than, like you said, those individual arguments. Okay, you make the individual arguments, but then okay, let's string them all together and understand their implications as a whole. Yeah, that.
Yeah, well, people's worldviews are so cemented.
Yeah.
It's typically the older you get, the more so, right? And so, like, if you're older than 40, 45, 50, like, I've encountered a lot of people where the perspective, they don't articulate it this way. They don't say it outright, but like, it's basically, I have my worldview and I really would just like it not to change until I die. Like, I just want everything to stay the same until I die, because it's known and it's comfortable, and I've figured out enough to make this worldview work well
Exactly.
enough. So
Yeah.
I don't want to fuck with it. I don't want the world to change, and I don't want my worldview to change. I just want to hang out here. Life has been hard enough. And fair play, because for many of them, it has been. I mean, they've had to navigate this, kind of crazy system that we've been operating within for the last several decades. And I get it that completely dissolving your existing worldview and supplanting another one, especially one that's so foreign, especially one that is so different, especially one that requires so much research and learning and understanding to integrate properly. Like, of course, I get it. Of course, you don't want to do that, but sometimes you don't have that choice, and I think we're on the precipice of not having that choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it is definitely deeply unsettling, I think, to many people to have to make that shift in their mindset or their approach to life, whatever we want to call it, their perspective. Yeah, I.
Some people just aren't ready to be unplugged. To you can never overdo the matrix metaphors in this space, and that's definitely an
Well,
apt one.
it kind of reminds me of the the Bill Hicks skit of "It's Just a Ride." Do you
Yeah,
know that?
yeah,
Do you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Look at my big house and my fancy car and my family. This has to be real,
yeah.
right?
That's a
No,
great
but
one.
it's just a dream, right? Like we're here because someone built this infrastructure that is illusory, that is faulty, and you can cling on to it if you want, but just understand that by clinging on to it, you are making a choice, and that you are by default not choosing what could very well be a better alternative, right? And
Mhm.
what obviously a lot of Bitcoiners believe to be a better alternative.
Yeah. Has the fact that being a Bitcoiner fairly deep down, I presume, the rabbit hole, and the resulting changes in potential changes in worldview and philosophy that typically engenders, has that created, any degree of friction in your life with the people in your life? Because I, well, you answer the question, then I'll chime in with my experience.
So first of all, I'll say that's a really good question. Second of all, I'll say yes because I think technically the answer is yes. But again, my sort of worldview, Bitcoin cemented it, but I was sort of down that path already long before I really got passionate about Bitcoin. It's just now Bitcoin has made all those feelings and thoughts come back with a vengeance, basically, because they had sort of been regressing, call it 3 or 4 years ago, and I wasn't as concerned with them, and now they've very much resurfaced. But in short, yes, on a couple of occasions they've caused some friction. It's a challenge.
Yeah. Well, this is exactly what I was telling you before we fired up the live stream, right? Where in 2000, it sounds like very similar to you. I wasn't necessarily on the Austrian economic side of things, but I just, saw all the fuckery in the system and saw
Yeah,
how the money was broken, and, became a gold bug, because what the fuck else did you do back then?
right.
And once I realized that that wasn't going to change anything. At best, sure, it can be an inflation hedge, but that ain't going to change much about society.
Right.
And you still got to, convert back into that shitty currency if you ever want to use it. And, that whole,
Yeah,
that old
it has
chestnut.
limitations. It has
Yeah. Oh,
severe limitations.
severe. And like all those ideals or those philosophies or, all that thinking that you kind of conjure up when you're trying to confront like how to approach this world and how to live in accord with your principles and your ethics and your ambitions and what you believe is possible, all of that, like as you said, took a back seat because you're like, I don't see a lever here. I don't see a tool to sufficiently actualize those things to actually hold on, like keep them top of mind. And Bitcoin, now that it's here and once you see what it's capable of doing and its implications, not only does it like change that thinking and say, well, now I have a tool, but it just amplifies it dramatically. And I think that's why we see so much of this energy and this enthusiasm and this voluntary contribution in the space, because now all of those are like, revivified, all of those ideals and principles. You actually see a scaffold, you see a structure on which to place all those things, and that they may actually be, rewarded in some capacity. And so I think, and in context of the question I was asking you, I think that can, although it's good on an individual level, because I think it conjures up those deepest, those things that are most deeply meaningful to you and allows you to begin to express them more, but it also creates a wider gap or a further divide between, people that may not have, or may not be undergoing a similar process.
It makes, the facade or the illusion of, let's just call it mainstream everything, that much more apparent. And sorry, maybe you saw I was pulling the book over here because you reminded me of one of the quotes in the book. So I quote people from across every spectrum in the book: entertainment, history,
Yeah, I love
philosophy,
it. How,
banking,
how did
you
you
name it.
select them? What was the selective process for all those quotes? I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, so every quote relates to the argument, that to each page that it's on. But I knew a lot of them just from digging into this stuff for years and years and years. So I had a sort of good bank of quotes that I wanted to pull from, and
Nice.
then there was a bunch of them that, okay, I'm sort of trying to find the right one that would match the argument I was going for. But the quote, just to come back to what we were talking about, is from Frederick Bastiat, The Law, where he says, quote, when law and morality contradict each other, the citizen has the cruel alternative of either losing his moral sense or losing his respect for the law.
Yeah.
And so,
That's
talking
awesome.
about when you see things differently, it really puts into context that, authority and being told this is what you should do is not the same as what is actually moral and righteous and what you as an individual should do, rather than what the collective is telling you should be doing. And that creates some of those tensions, again, for those people who really have this high stock in the system and or have this really vested interest or vested belief in it. Yeah, so it's
Well, yeah, I mean, it pits you as the rebel, even though, in a different system, in a different environment, you may be the hero, or you may just be a plain old person living a meaningful, principled life. But
yeah,
because you're doing that that's exactly what that quote was, articulating, was that because
exactly.
you're doing that in such a system, being that, quote unquote good person, to oversimplify it, actually kind of turns you into the rebel. And that's what creates, because families and partners and friends, they, most of the time want the best for you. And if they see you going down a road in which you're at least being perceived as someone who's, a little bit too, outside the system, a little bit too rebellious, speaks up a little bit too much, has a little bit too much of a contrarian bent or attitude, like it causes them concern. And then you're so certain and firm in your stance that you are approaching this perspective, the right way, and you're trying to align with the things that are meaningful to you. and they're, equally certain in their fear for you doing that, and the kind of discomfort it creates. I mean, I can
And
see
it's
why it
hard,
creates tension.
and it's hard not to get defensive about it because
Yeah,
it's a deeply held belief, right? It's
yeah,
not, yeah, like it when it means that much to you, it's part of, what makes you human and your humanity in your life. These are the things you're supposed to fight for. And
exactly.
when you're sort of told, shut up, stay in your corner, it doesn't feel very good and you want to lash out. And so it's, in life, dealing with the individuals that you deal with in your community, in your circle, in your social circles, finding that balance is something that is tricky and important, but and depending on the instance, it's going to be worthwhile or it's going to be not, and you have to pick your fights and you have to not. But there's no doubt that if you believe something to be right, you would be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't stand up for it.
Yeah, so true. And that's one of the liberating things. Bitcoin is uh, referred to as the incorruptible substance. Breedlove brought that into the common parlance, and I think a lot of us like it. And to the degree that it is proven to be true over time, we shall see to what degree it is proven to be true over time. Um, but and I think a lot of people have heard the kind of discipline is freedom thing before. I think Jocko Willink popularized that. But my
Sorry, say
point,
what okay, sorry, I didn't hear the quote, but
discipline equals freedom, I think, is the quote. But
okay.
you were saying that living within your truth is like perhaps the most important or deeply meaningful thing you can do. And it's somewhat counterintuitive because, and I, the reason why I framed it as being the incorruptible substance, because I frame it as being incorruptible. Like, not only
Right.
are you engaging with this thing, but what if you were to become something that was incorruptible? Once you refined what you were, to not bend or break to circumstance and to be incorruptible. And I don't mean don't be uncompromising. I just mean for the most important things, like for what you believe to be true and right and good, being incorruptible with those. And that would seem to be like a restriction, right? That would seem to be limiting your scope or realm of behavior. But I actually, the more I think about it, the more it seems to be a freedom, because now kind of it's more clear what your action is going to be in a variety of circumstances, because you refuse to compromise on certain foundational things.
Yeah, and so for me, I think in the book, at least, and from some of the readings, I end up aligning freedom with responsibility, which is probably very much in line with discipline and what you were saying earlier. Um, but yeah, it's in terms of humans and us as people wanting to defend our ground, believing that we're always right, or from our perspective always right, because truth is a matter of perspective always. I think we all need to keep that sort of humility and know that as much as we can believe whatever philosophy we want, you need to operate knowing that not everyone will always be on that same page, and you may very well be wrong, no
Mm-hmm.
matter how right you think you are and how well researched you think you are. And that's why having that incorruptible substance that is beyond human, that is superhuman, um, is so important, because it keeps us on track, right? If we are deviating from the path for one reason or another and becoming corrupted in one sense or another, having this thing that absolutely insists that you stay on track is vitally important for our future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And there's a paragraph, I think it's on one of the last pages of the book. And I'm not sure. I know you spoke with Dan Prince on the Once Bitten podcast, and I know he read out a paragraph. I just don't know
Yeah.
if it was this one. Was it this one?
Give me the first couple words. I'll tell you right away.
Bitcoin as an alternative money is
Yeah.
unprecedented.
If
It's
you
that
want to
one.
read it, again, by
Yeah,
all
fuck
means,
it.
because
Fuck it. I'll read it
yeah.
again. Yeah. All right. Let me blow it up here. Um,
This
so
is this was a
it's a
special one.
great paragraph. Here we go. Bitcoin as an alternative money is unprecedented for the speed and scope with which it is revaluing the opportunity cost of pre-existing money everywhere. Its insistent presence in the global marketplace redefines money by demonstrating that it can exist independent of any state, that it can be compatible with time, that earnings can be commensurate to productivity, that credibility comes at a cost, that patience improves judgment, that precision fosters efficiency, that incentives outperform mandates, that utility is consequential, that proof builds trust, that justly empowered communities are resilient, that scarcity is a prerequisite of value, that competition drives growth, that adversaries benefit from collaboration, that good governance entails accountability, that quality breeds morality, that social consensus is scalable, and that responsibility is inseparable from freedom.
Not bad, right? Not bad for a kid from Toronto.
Yeah, man, that's a pretty banging paragraph. Did that one flow out in a moment of flow, or did you have to meticulously put that one together?
I definitely had to meticulously like stitch that one together. But believe it or not, I actually had the idea for that fairly early on, because I knew that I was sort of building up all these little arguments, and so how do I sort of encapsulate what this is in one shot if that's the goal. And yeah, and that one, the opportunity cost of money, understanding that we're all free to choose our money, right? It's to some degree, obviously, as a Canadian, it's harder for me to choose the euro as my preferred currency. Not that I would necessarily want to, but Bitcoin makes the choice available. And if whether you know about it or not, well, whether you know about it or not, I mean, become aware of it, first of all, if you don't know that the choice between money.
Read the book.
Yeah, read the book. But it's the choice is out there, and you better damn well be informed about it, because I've seen people lately on Twitter talking about, oh, if you don't own Bitcoin, you're short Bitcoin. Like, everyone is short Bitcoin. Like, this is an untenable position. Don't be caught in that position. Like, that's basically what it's become. If you don't own Bitcoin, if you're not paying attention to Bitcoin, you are just plain old short it, and that's a bad spot to be in, because because there's this great potential reward on multiple facets, not just the financial aspect of it. If we can agree that it is a great basis for commerce for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was a great paragraph and great way to end the book. And for people listening that haven't read the book, it is an example of your skill at putting things a particular way throughout the book. I've got notes and screenshots and all kind of stuff from reading the book, because there was just so many good, succinct, powerful one-liners, and testament to you as a skilled writer. But speaking of which, I mean, how has the book been received? I mean, not just sales and accolades, but people reaching out to you, what your life has looked like since releasing the book.
So the people who have read it, who have reached out to me, have all sort of had glowing reviews, which is obviously very satisfying as an author, to know that they really enjoyed it, and that they took something away from it, right? Like, I gave value, I provided value to them by writing this, and so that's very meaningful to me. So yeah, reviews are positive. Everyone in the Bitcoin community that I've spoken to who has read it has had great things to say about it. So that's been great. Yeah, and then in terms of sales are sales. It's like you said, I'm not going to make money writing a book, or I'm not going to make a lot of money writing the book.
How did you publish it?
I self-published it on Amazon. Like on Amazon, and then some other ebook platforms as well. But it was all me. Like, the images, the cover. I mean, I didn't draw these things. I had a graphic designer I worked with who was fantastic. But like, everything, every inch of that book is me. It's every little detail. And I mean, do you have the physical book or the ebook?
The ebook.
The ebook. Okay, so I mean, even the things like the coins at the start of every chapter, right? Like, there's meaning to that. It was all purposeful, and it all relates to something. Like, I would specifically plant words in some pages that would relate back to a different argument. Even if I'm not referencing the fact that it related back, I'm trying to get, your synapses firing and get you making connections that maybe you weren't going to make on your own. So yeah, I just overall, I'm very happy I did it, even if financially it won't be my best investment. At least I have some Bitcoin to offset it. But yeah, it's been a great experience. I'm really happy I did it, because I just, people reaching out to me, it's strange how some of the feedback comes from some strange places, like people you didn't really know or expect to reach out to you are reaching out. Like, that's been interesting. So yeah,
Like
overall,
what wouldn't you expect to, like, you don't have to name names, but who wouldn't you expect to reach out to?
yeah, no, just like, sorry, yeah, your videos, I don't know if you know,
It's a
your
little
videos a
foggy.
little
Yeah,
fuzzy
it
there.
does
Okay.
that from time to time.
Someone who is, called a friend of my parents, who, someone I don't see or hear their name very often, kind of thing, where, we gave out a bunch of books to my, my family and friends, my parents' family, friends. And just, someone who I wouldn't talk to on a regular basis is like raving about the book. Apparently they can't shut up about the book. Like, and I'm like, really? Like, I haven't heard this guy's name in years. And all of a sudden I'm getting this feedback that, like, oh, he's just enamored with it. So
That's
hearing just,
awesome.
yeah, weird stuff like that, little odd stuff like that is super cool. You get the odd person on Twitter reaching out, being like, hey man, read the book. Thanks for writing the book. It was great. I'm going to recommend it. Things like that. So, that kind of stuff is fantastic.
Do you think you'll do more? Or like write a follow up?
Well, I mean, you read the book. It was this was meant to be, this is my Sistine Chapel. This is my Mona Lisa. If I write another book, it'll have to be on a completely different topic, because I got out everything I think I could have to say about Bitcoin. Sure, there are pieces of I can't obviously address everything in Bitcoin, but and there's pieces to the puzzle that I missed. But on the whole, I got out everything I want to get out. I sent the message that I wanted to send. I purposely, A, wanted to create that sort of easy reading experience, and B, a very positive read, right? Like to read the book, you feel good reading it, especially coming at the end of it.
Yeah.
And to be clear, that paragraph you read is not the actual final paragraph of the book. So for readers, there's still another little surprise in there for you. And the one that follows that paragraph is also very impactful. Yeah.
Have you, we were talking before we started that, lockdowns occurring in Toronto, code red or whatever, and very polarizing issues emerging this year, and everyone has strong opinions about them one way or the other. And in Bitcoin, we, because of our perception that money is such a critical component of society and civilization, that, you upgrade the money, you change the money's characteristics, and you will have a commensurate effect in the society. And if the change in the money is indeed an upgrade, then you will get an upgrade in the society. Change the money, fix the world, right? As it goes.
Exactly.
And so we tend to say Bitcoin fixes this to pretty much everything. And now that you have a book to kind of back up, give you a little bit of cred, like when you get in these discussions socially or wherever, do you use that, kind of tact more, or do you just say, interesting perspective, guys, thank you for sharing, read this book and you'll understand where I'm coming from on this?
Well, yeah, naturally I have to pitch the book everywhere I go, right?
I
I mean,
know, but what I'm saying is, like, do you pitch it in every circumstance? Like if people are talking about whether it's Trump, politics, inequality, lockdowns, freedom, are you just like, this book will show you the way?
This will address that. Like, to say that, the book Magic Internet Money is going to address COVID is a big leap, I think, to make, and one I am not that brash to make.
What? Come on! If we
but
were
to
existing on a Bitcoin standard, you wouldn't have this type of shit.
Don't get me wrong. If we were on a Bitcoin standard, I think the response to COVID would have been very different. Would have been, much more responsible. We would have individuals capable of making decisions for themselves, to evaluate the different risks involved with this pandemic. but yeah, I sort of separate the two, because I'm just asking for trouble if I say, oh yeah, buy Bitcoin because it's going to cure COVID. I think that's I don't think that one's going to go over well no matter who I'm talking to, unless they're already orange pill
Well,
Bitcoiner.
I expect you as a skilled author and potentially skilled orator to maybe frame it differently than that, Jay. No,
Well,
Jesse.
so here I'll give you this one. To think of money is the soil in which the tree of society grows, right? And fiat is this dry, barren soil that we're like pouring gas on it instead of water, right? We're just poisoning the soil of society, right? If the tree is our society and our livelihood. Bitcoin is fertile soil and water to help it grow, and you have sturdy, a big trunk and sturdy branches and leaves that come back season after season after season and are vibrantly green, whereas the other one is just dying and decaying and deadwood. And yeah, in terms of
Well, that's a good way to frame it up for them, right? So you could go take
yes.
that angle, and if they buy your analogy, then maybe they'd be more receptive to the idea that Bitcoin has something to do with lockdowns and virus responses and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, and lockdowns, just as a general comment, I mean, it's so, to me, somewhat counterintuitive to think that that lockdowns can be a cure when they are literally starving us of stimulation of the things that make life worth living, right? Like, okay, can't go to a ball game, can't go to a bar, can't see my friends. Like, these are the things that make me want to get up in the bed. I mean, get out of bed in the morning and be productive. And like, without them, so, well, why do any of the things that I do?
Yeah.
And I think, the cost of lockdowns gets lost, I think, on a lot of people.
Yeah, and we don't need to sugarcoat it. Like, in my opinion, it's utter insanity. I mean, it's a manifestation of just how perverse our entire system of social and economic organization has become. That this is the response, and that this response is possible. Is Yeah, I think it's indicative of just how bad things are, and I can't wait for as you say, a new forest to grow up around it, and
It,
different
it,
ways of tackling such things.
it's also indicative of the way we've taught ourselves and built our systems over the last couple decades or generations, where we have sort of gotten away, not sort of, we have gotten away from the principles of liberty and that self-responsibility that we were talking about earlier. We've diverted from that, and this is one of several effects of that, the economic impact being another. And yeah, and one of the things I think about now, people like to say, oh yeah, well, when the vaccine comes or when some magic miracle happens that we're able to return to normal, everyone's going to be super awkward when we return to normal, because they're going to be so out of practice of how to interact socially. Like, think about that, right? We've been locked in for, it's not a year, 9 months, whatever it is, 8 months. And it apparently is just going to keep going and going, and there's no end in sight. You can pin your hopes on a vaccine, but that, seems like wishful thinking for a lot of reasons. But yeah, like, when or if we ever get back to some semblance of normal, like, you're not even going to know how to be normal anymore, because you're training yourself to be whatever this new quote new normal is, which is something I don't want a part of.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you, and we'll spare anybody who's listening the extended COVID, response critique, but suffice it to say that engaging in Bitcoin and contributing to it and helping people understand what it's all about and helping the this parallel system grow, I think is one, if not the best thing we can do to try to ensure that such circumstances don't befall us again in the future.
Exactly. And because, as we said earlier, it is that incorruptible substance, it would be very difficult to stray from, a righteous path if Bitcoin, supersedes fiat in time, which I think a lot of us expect. And it would make episodes like the one we're going through now very difficult.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I mean, what's your day job, and what do you do day to day when you're not going line by line over Bitcoin books.
Yeah. So yeah, this is, I guess, a little embarrassing. I'm basically unemployed now. I approached this.
Too much time writing books.
Yeah, no. I totally committed my life to that book and
Good
gave
for
up.
you, man. That's fucking
I,
awesome.
I gave up other employment opportunities or whatever because once I made the decision that I was writing the book, it was like it would be a waste of time and effort to think of anything else. So
That's
I needed to
badass.
get it out. But then my approach was that, okay, well, once the book comes out, again, if I can make it as good as I think I can make it, then because I'm just creating this, in my mind, this beautiful thing that I'm giving to the world, that will lead to whatever comes next. I've never ever in my life had an idea of, oh, this is what I want to do with my life. Like I've never known that direction with certainty ever. And so I committed to writing the book, and then I thought, okay, now at least the one direction I sort of have is Bitcoin. But what I do with that, I'm not sure, and I'm happy the book is out because now it's an excuse for me to start having conversations with different and interesting people, and to find out, okay, so now I'm sort of showcasing, hey, I do have a sort of skill set. I do somewhat know what I'm talking about. I would say I still have a ways to go to perfect all my arguments and my understandings, especially again, face to face, person to person, having conversations. But at least I've created this book as a basis of, okay, if I need to refresh myself on any of the arguments, I can go back to it, because I strung every word together very meticulously. But yeah, no, where I go from here, I'm not sure. Thank you for asking that, because no one's asked me that. It's a different question for sure. And yeah, I'm a free agent, so come and get me. Make me your best offer.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love all about that. And obviously, I think one of the impediments to taking that leap of faith, and I think that is an apt way of characterizing it. But one of the impediments of doing that up till now has been that, obviously the industry is still in its infancy. There's some great companies, but you don't have employers with tens of thousands of employees at them. You have small, scrappy companies, by and large, that are operating in this space, and they're so great, and the people in them are great. I've talked to a ton of them, but there aren't that many quote unquote job opportunities in this space. And I think we are probably, this cycle, between now and 2024, I think we're about to see a lot more interest in this space, and as a result, a lot more of a market for competent, forthright people that, like you, have just, again, we like we talked right at the beginning, this feeling of being compelled. It's like it consumes so much of your mind space that it's exceedingly and increasingly difficult to devote your attention to anything else, because you're so on fire, you're so energized by this, and your mind is so consumed by it, that to say, like, to, put that in the corner and say, hush, quiet down for a little bit while you act like you're devoting your time and energy to something else is, with each passing day, harder and harder. And I think, again, one of the unique, amazing things about this thing that we're engaging with and dancing around is that it bestows sufficient faith for people to take that leap. And again, I go back to people that work on core development and the BTC Pay server team. I mean, when they all got together, same thing. And it's incredible. And I spoke, a friend of mine that I interviewed for the 21ism initiative recently, you're probably familiar with him,
Yeah.
Durgigi. And
his writing, by the way, I have him sort of quoted, one of his articles quoted in the book. I read Bitcoin Gravity and was like, that one got me. Like he's put out a lot of great works, but Bitcoin Gravity for me slays me. Sorry.
Yeah. I only bring him up because in that interview from 21ism, he said that he made that leap of faith. He was in that circumstance, and he was like, I just can't. It's got to be this or nothing. And I said, one of the questions I asked him was, how did you rationalize it? Because the opportunity cost is great. Everyone wants to stack as many sats as they can. And, amongst, as part of the rationalization, of course, the passion was there and the interest and the compulsion and everything else. But he was like, I consider every sat I make to be 100x. That's how I rationalize the opportunity cost in my mind. So even if I'm working a side project, or if even I'm working on Bitcoin in some capacity that's not paying me very much, in my mind, those are worth 100 times more, because that's where I see this going. And, part of the rationalization, because I know it's not all financially motivated, but just that leap of faith that this thing inspires, again, is just a remarkable component of it all.
Yeah, like, it did, I was very lucky for sure in my sort of personal just situation in life that I could afford to give myself, this runway of time where, okay, I'm going to try to do something that I really just felt passionate about and wanted to do.
Yeah.
And also being sort of keenly aware that I'm doing this, also knowing that the thing that I'm working on, yes, it gives me, some kind of stature, standing, whatever, in this space, but that we're still in the infancy to a degree of Bitcoin. It is very much a growing space, and it doesn't really matter how I become a part of it, but just if I become a part of it, somehow I will grow with it. I don't have that again, I don't have that clear vision, clear direction of exactly how I'm going to grow with it. I only know that I can. And if I can continue to sort of put my head to it and think about it and work on different things, it'll work out. Like something I will latch on somewhere somehow, whether I do something whether I start my own, project company, whatever, or whether I latch on with others, or whether I contract. Like I don't even really care. It's not as big a concern, because I just know that, okay, like I'm a part of this, and this is a good thing to be a part of. Like if I'm going to be a part of something, this is the thing. If you're planning for 10, 20, 30 years down the road, like this is a pretty damn good thing to want to be a part of.
Well, that's exactly it, right? That's part of the thing that allows you to have that faith. It's like, am I in the right place? Yes. Am I, like, have I done my work? Yes. Am I continuing to refine, what my understanding is, and the kind of genuineness and honesty of my expression in this thing? Yes. Then something good's going to happen.
And even though it wasn't financially, or probably won't be financially rewarding, at least it is easily the most fulfilling thing I've ever done,
Yeah.
on a professional level.
Yeah. I mean, that's across the board. That's always the everybody says that when we come on a topic like this. Last thing,
and it makes up for, where you may be missing in other areas.
Yeah, for sure. Last thing for you, Jesse. You mentioned Gigi's piece on gravity, and I'm always just interested. I mean, I won't ask for the entire rabbit hole story, but when did things really start to accelerate, I guess, down that journey? Like what aspect of Bitcoin's gravity, or what aspect of you rather, did Bitcoin's gravity pull on the hardest and yank you down the rabbit hole the quickest?
For sure. It was a process that occurred at different points in time for different reasons. It started, call it in 2011, which is pretty sure when I ran into Bitcoin for the first time, and made the connection of, okay, 21 million, hard limit. It comes into existence at the time. I was like, okay, through energy. I didn't understand the mechanics of it whatsoever. And I understood that there was a predetermined schedule. So it's like gold, where, okay, initially we're picking the low hanging fruit because we sort of discovered it. And then as you try to get more and more of it, it becomes harder and harder to earn. So that clicked for me in 2011, but I didn't participate in any financial way until 2017, when I had been, starting to think about blockchain revolution. The book came out, and I'd sort of read that, and I was like, okay, that sounds nice. Pie in the sky, everything's going to be blockchain fixes everything. And let's be clear here, blockchain does not fix everything, and blockchain alone is not the solution. There is more to Bitcoin than blockchain, and yeah, I'll leave it at that. Started to learn about blockchain, and then 2017 hit, and just by dumb luck, I happened to be, in the markets a little bit. Someone was like, hey, you should check this out. I think this is a good opportunity. So I dabbled in it, and then 2017 happened, everything blew up, and you couldn't help but get caught up in it if you were in it at the time. And so basically from there, it was a learning process, which was also a money losing process of, all these coins, a coin for this, a coin for that, a coin to save, a coin for computing, a coin for file sharing, a coin for everything. We have a coin for everything now. We're going to solve everything with a coin for everything. And then as sort of time went on and markets went on, the sound money Austrian economic roots that had been laid for me, 8 years, or well, if we're talking 2017, 6 years prior in 2011, or sorry, in 2007 2011 was when I first heard about Bitcoin, but the Austrian roots were 2007. So a decade earlier, those started to come back into my mind. And between that and honestly, like the amazing, talented writers and educators in Bitcoin really helped solidify it. It was like putting the missing puzzle piece together where, oh yeah, like this is the thing. It has every reason why it is the thing. And once I made that connection, again, that was when I was like, okay, I have to be involved with this. I have to do this because there's nothing else worth working on really. And in combination with, okay, I'm not particularly happy at my job. Sure, the very last job I worked at, I worked with great people. It was a good company, but it's still a job. I'm working for someone else. I'm not personally fulfilled with the work I was doing. And so it was like, okay, I sort of just had this culmination of both experiences and then, financially, okay, I just have this opportunity. There's this window. I can ignore it or I can go through it and let's see what happens. And, I went for it.
Isn't it just amazing and extremely unique that, so it sounds about like somewhere middle 2018, you kind of realized that it was all about Bitcoin.
Yeah. I would say 2018, definitely I abandoned that whole, the shitcoin casino, the blockchain hype, abandoned all that, realized it was illusory.
Right.
There's a facade, there's an illusion to all of that stuff. And you need to really have it's difficult to understand all the rationales and reasons why, but it's there. And I tried to make that apparent in the book. For those that maybe are still contemplating, oh yeah, blockchain is going to help with this and all these crypto coins are going to do that. I tried to really clarify that for people. But yeah, in 2018, it hit home for me. I left my job. And for a few months there, was like, what am I actually going to do? I don't really know. And then eventually, okay, started working on the project, which became the book.
Yeah.
Which led me here.
Yeah, I mean, once you start to see it, I mean, it becomes so incredibly rich, like intellectually speaking, that there's so much to dig into, and it becomes so obvious too. But my point in saying that was like, how peculiar is it and amazing and everything else that you kind of quote unquote get it in 2000, let's say for easy numbers, middle 2018,
Yep.
and you are a published author on the subject 2 years later. I mean, that's, we talk about the gravity. That's the strength of the gravity of this thing, that once you get sucked in, I mean, it's quite possible you get sucked in hard. And then, lo and behold, 2 years later, you're contributing to the corpus of information that's available on the subject.
Exactly. When I left, it's not like I foresaw this, that I was going to be writing a book when I left my last job, right? It's, I had no idea that this was going to happen. But again, that gravity, that allure, it compels you and it makes you do things you didn't necessarily think you were going to do, but they align with your values. They align with, potential long-term goals, and they are righteous in what they're trying to achieve. It feels good. It feels like you're contributing to a positive future. And like, what more could you ask for? If you can create value for yourself and for others and create a positive future, like it's this perfect, combination of factors that just come together and work so seamlessly together. It's like, well, yeah, like if I contribute, then it's only going to make this thing that I'm interested in better. And that's going to make me better. And then I'm going to want to contribute more. And it just goes in the circle. And it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. And I think that's probably a good place to finish off. So I'll give you the last word if you wanted to direct people anywhere or show the
Yeah,
book one more time or anything like that.
yeah, for sure. Here, if we're on video, I'll show the cover here. Magic Internet Money, a book about Bitcoin. It's available on Amazon, on Kobo, you name it. You can go to www.magicbitcoinbook.com and to find out what is money.
Oh, nice. Didn't see that on my copy. I like
Yeah.
it.
And then if you want, you can follow me on Twitter at Jayberjay, Jayberjay.
Awesome. Well, look, man, great job on the book. I think it's an awesome contribution to the space, and I look forward to the next time we get to chat.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. It was great chatting with you.